oh, you specifying the make and model of this means nothing to me because they all look the same. They have hoods, they have wheels, and they go broom, broom. That's it. So for me, just like with the Fast and the Furious movies, I have no interest. Like, anytime there's a car on the screen, like, my brain's like, what else is happening? Why are things moving? I don't care. So that might have made this movie longer for me.
Were you constantly confused about, like, what this circle that was, like, in front of them that they were, like, gripping onto very tightly constantly to...
No, I know enough to know what a steering wheel is. Like, I know that much. Like, I've been
And you know that all cars also have a series
them.
of buttons on the steering wheel that produce different effects depending on which one you push, right? Like homing pigeons.
I did enjoy that. Because
this is true, but on most, like, commercial models, it's, like, radio.
Yeah.
Your car doesn't have, like, jack jumpers?
Oh, God, I wish so much.
Welcome to Certain POV's Another Pass podcast with Case and Sam, where we take another look at movies that we find fascinating but flawed. Let's see how we could have fixed them.
Hey, everyone, and welcome back to Another Pass podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Sam Alisea.
Hi.
And we are revving up as we have cleared our 150th episode. We are recording this well before that episode is dropped, so this feels like just like general space. But today we are joined by the wonderful Sophia Ricciardi.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. Right? You nailed it. You got it in one.
Pre-roll, I was like so stressed about it.
He said the name like 10 times.
This is true.
Just practicing.
As far as the audience knows, you got it perfectly without even having to ask.
So, Sophia, we were on your show Movie Struck a little while ago, although by the time this drops, it will have been a long while ago. But who are you? Like, tell people quick plugs.
Yeah, hello. I am Sophia Ricciardi. I do a lot of podcasts, basically. My flagship show is Movie Struck. It's a podcast about movies and the people who watch them. Every episode, I bring on a different guest and ask them to pick any movie they want for us to watch and discuss. It's a great time. Sam and Case came on and talked about the Muppets. It was a blast. You should go back and listen to that episode if you want to hear more from them, because it was so much fun. I produce a couple other shows here and there. I work with Overly Sarcastic Productions a lot. I'm on the D&D podcast, Rolling with Difficulty. Sometimes I tweet about movies on Twitter, but if that's still around by the time this episode comes out.
Yeah.
Big questions.
Yeah, but
the existential questions.
My main show is Movie Struck, and you can find me and everything I do there. And I love movies, and more importantly, I love Speed Racer. So
yeah, I was about to ask. So why are we watching Speed Racer?
We're watching Speed Racer because I have a reputation on the internet for being a massive fan of this movie, and it felt appropriate to continue singing its praises on this podcast, where we will hopefully be fixing it. I think that it is the perfect crystallization of the idea of commitment to the bit. It's both a incredibly good adaptation of a cartoon that is admittedly very old and cheesy, and itself manages to hold on to a lot of that fun element while being a beautiful, if polarizing movie. I really like the production design and cinematography, but I recognize that it is not for everyone, and I'm sure we have much to discuss in that regard. Yeah.
I hadn't seen this movie before. It was on our list of like, because it's a flop. Mm-hmm. Like it had a $120 million budget and it had a $94 billion return, which if anything I ever did had a $94 million return, I'd be like, oh, that's great. But if I burned $26 million in the process, yep. Probably some legs would be broken of mine. Maybe both of them. I can't reveal to the audience that I'm a centaur.
Yeah, and this movie came out when I was prime. See all of the trailers for it, and
I was curious. I was going to ask because I'm getting up there in my years, and so I was curious. This movie is the type of movie that I think would resonate for people who saw it young, and I'm about to be very pained to find out the answer. How old were you when you saw this movie, and did you see it in theaters?
Oh, great question. Let me just do some quick math to figure out how old I was, because this came out in 2008. I'm about early 20s, so would have been maybe 12 when this came out. I did see it in theaters. I will say a big part of why I in particular was tuned into this movie coming out is because my dad, who has been on Movie Struck to talk about this movie, is a massive Speed Racer fan. He watched the original cartoon or the anime really when he was growing up, and we would watch those when I was a really little kid. So when this movie was coming out, he's like, Sophia, we got to see it. I'm so excited for this. And his excitement carried on to young Sophia as well. And we both really loved this movie. But yes, I saw this in theaters when it came out, and almost more than the movie itself, the thing I remember about it is the marketing campaign that went with it, because it had juicy drop pop and like baby bottle pop tie-ins. There was a little like flash game that you could play. If everyone remembers flash games, that was just like a racing game with all the cars from the show, but you had to little code in from all those like lollipops and things that you could buy. And then there is one shot in the movie where they open a big drawer of candy and there's product placement right there. I don't know if I love this marketing campaign, because I think something that could have been improved with this movie would be to have it be PG-13 instead of PG. I think it's marketed to the wrong subset of the audience. Yeah.
So the minor spoiler for my pitch, I was going to go the other way.
Really?
Yeah, I was saying like, yeah, I think this could have been a G movie, and that would have just opened up a larger audience.
Interesting.
Ooh, this will be an interesting conversation.
Yes.
Okay, so you're thinking this could have been a PG-13 movie because, admittedly, there's some swearing in it, which I think is like one of the big reasons why it ended up not being fully G-rated on this all. And then there's like cartoonish violence, because everything in this movie is cartoonish as hell.
There's a moment where a man flips a car, punches a different driver in the face, lands the car, and then smirks. And if you're not on board when you're watching that, like, I got nothing for you.
I mean, honestly, for me, it was the beehive drop into someone's car.
Beautiful.
Like that was awesome. That was great. Mm-hmm. Full Looney Tunes there.
Yeah, Sam, had you seen this movie before? And in either way, had you had an association with Speed Racer before the movie came out?
So yeah, I did have an association with Speed Racer before the movie came out, because I used to watch the old reruns. I'm not quite old enough to have watched it when it originally aired, but I did watch old reruns when I am much older than Sophia, but not quite old enough. And so I did watch the reruns. It was something that, was funny. There were actually times where like Hanna-Barbera actually worked Speed Racer into some of their shows too. Like there was like crossover events. And I watched all of those old cartoons. I really like weird, quirky things. So Speed Racer right up, because it's very cheesy. It's very like fun, action-packed. I did not see this movie, was not sold on the trailer. I remember seeing it and being like, yeah, you know what? I'm probably good. Like, I'm probably good. And so when this came up, I was just like, oh no, like, am I going to hate this? Like, is this going to be okay? And then I watched it and I was like, actually, it's really not that bad. It's kind of fun. It's got really fun moments. I feel like, I feel like it's one of those movies that you finish it and it like had really fun moments and you're not quite sure where it went wrong. Like I was sitting there after the film and I was like, was it like the tone? Because I feel like they committed to the cheese, they committed to the beat, they committed to the drama, because there's so much drama, which is always encased in anime. Definitely like they're like really like, all of these terrible things are happening about racing and Racer X, which I always loved in the cartoon. And like, I was just like, really honestly, like just the whole through line there, I was down with. Like, I was just like, and I knew what the twist was, but like, I was just like, yeah, they're not going to know. But at the end of the film, I still felt like it was too long. And I felt like there was like, despite being committed to the bit, there still felt like a tone issue. Like there were things that they wanted to do. And I think that's why both of you are like, it should have gone lighter or heavier, because there were moments that leaned into both. And I feel like the film didn't know if it wanted to be like super serious commentary on greed and corruption versus a child and a monkey fucking everything up. Like, I don't know if they knew what they really want. I'm sorry, it was a chimp. Apologies. And
yes, as we established, as we did our 5-part retrospective on the Planet of the Apes movies recently, monkey is an offensive term to chimpanzee.
Yeah. Don't want to do that.
Yes.
I, for one, welcome our ape overlords, so I'm not trying to offend them up ahead at all. But yeah, no, I actually look, I think the thing is, at the end of the movie, I had a smile and I really liked the cootie warning. I thought that was great. Totally keeping that no matter what in my pitch. I thought it was wonderful. And yeah, I that's how I felt about this film. And thank you, Sophia, for. I mean, it was a little long. It cut into my World Cup time this morning. Not happy about that, but I enjoyed myself.
You didn't get the same energy from the first race series of announcers from around the world giving you the same spirit as the World Cup in that opening sequence.
They were very good, but they're not as good as the coverage on Telemundo. And I just want to say that if you are watching soccer on Fox or any English-speaking network, you are missing out. Please only watch it in Spanish. Learn Spanish just for that, because that is top-tier announcing. As was in this movie. I mean, the Spanish announcers were wonderful.
Yeah. I love the opening sequence where they're telling the tragic story of Rex Racer, and they use the different announcers from different languages. And even if you don't speak every language, you kind of understand what's being said is all in the same
vein.
Yeah,
you get the gist. Yeah. God, if every sporting event had green screened announcers just being superimposed over the action, just being panning across, and then another person goes back and forth. I would love sports way more than I do, because I'm not a sports guy.
You're not a sports person, no. I have to say, though, what I really loved about that, I'm just going to jump into things that I loved about this movie, is that it was great to get that exposition in that way, because it was still fun and it was still exciting. And you're watching this race and you're doing these cutbacks, but they weren't They weren't distracting from the actual through line of what was happening. So I actually thought that was really well done, because you have the announcers, and it's from all over the world. So this gives you the scope of how big this league is, number one. And then they're telling the story of Rex, who we've kind of met in this first part with, young Speed. And so we're getting this vision, and in between they're telling stories, and then each of his family members are getting to have a moment to kind of introduce part of that story in depth. And I thought oh, this is really well done, because this is actually all exposition, but it's still moving really well, and it's actually really great pacing, and it's fun and exciting. And also I don't have to look at cars too much, so I am really enjoying this.
Yeah, this movie does a fantastic job of using characters or objects wiping across the screen to keep the movement of the race, even when they're not on the cars. Something I think it just does admittedly, some of the races are a little long. This movie is an over 2-hour runtime, and you can always cut these things down. I'm very pro that sweet 90 minutes, but all of the races, you kind of keep the concept of space and movement without having to just have one big overhead shot of the track, seeing all the cars and where they're laid out through the different wipes that they're using. And I think that they nail that throughout the film, but you get to you dive right into it. They waste no time getting you right into here's how this film is going to look the whole time. If you think it's going to chill out, it is not.
Speed Racer has to go. I mean,
he's got to go.
if they stopped, that'd be wrong. It would be wrong. It would be without the spirit. It does keep the spirit at the very least.
Yeah, it's so no one can say that this movie isn't experimental. In terms of how they're trying to present everything. We talked about how it's at the same time very for kids style cartoony, and at the same time how can we have commentary on capitalism? And I found that very prescient. I was
it is a Wachowski movie. So
yeah, exactly.
Capitalism it's a Wachowski has to work its way in there somewhere.
That's exactly what I was getting to. This is definitely a Wachowski movie, and it's and the Wachowskis in general, I feel, are getting sort of a second look in pop culture these days. People are looking back and looking at all the things they've done and seeing interesting themes that were in earlier works, and appreciating a lot of the movies that they have done since that kind of were panned. And this movie's sort of the big start of their having some issues in their careers. But we talked about Jupiter Ascending, and as dumb as that movie is, I really like it. It's a movie that I have a lot of fun with. And Cloud Atlas is a movie that I love way more than it probably deserves, but I still love it so goddamn much. And someday we'll figure out how to release the lost episode on that one, because it's a lot to talk about in that movie. But the Wachowskis have really interesting stuff going on as their own baggage going into this movie. And then you've got the Speed Racer franchise, which so I grew up watching the Speed Racer X, the 90s series that dropped. That was my first introduction to it. I'd seen I saw some of the original series, but I haven't really watched that much of it. It's by the 90s, it was dated.
It was my 50-something-year-old father watched it when he was a child.
Right.
So it's been around for a minute, and it was not new for him. So.
Right. And so I was familiar with an updated version, which, like, I'm not going to get into what's the most pure version of this cartoon? Like, because obviously, like, the one that has the cultural impact is the 60s version. And then everything since then has just been like playing with it all. But like, it was a franchise I was familiar with as a kid. I knew the Racer X stuff. I knew that franchise as a whole. And then this movie unlocked a deep memory for me in terms of just like remembering Speed Racer stuff, because there was an arcade game for Speed Racer that was, I only ever saw at one place in the wild, but it was a place that I saw a lot, which was at the Grotto Pizza in Bethany Beach, Delaware. There was the Speed Racer arcade game, and that, and just every summer I would like at some point play that game. And it was like, it was like one of the arcade racing games where you have like the full seating area kind of set up, and like your handle actually has the buttons to press, like, so all very cool stuff. But it was like, oh my God, that unlocked that memory for me. And as I was like watching this movie, I was like, all right, so an additional challenge they have, and Sam, I'm glad you brought up like Mario Kart. Like, this movie feels like a video game and could very easily have just been a video game.
It definitely could. And I love the Mario Kart-ness of this movie. Like, I love the visual effects because they've got like the speed ramps, and like the course feels insane. Like, this feels like a league that is like no other racing league you've ever seen, which makes it feel modern and fun. I mean, like, honestly, even the track reminds me of like the last stage, Rainbow Stage in Mario Kart, right? Like in the first scene. So it is fun. And like, especially for someone like me, I'm not a car person. I don't like cars. I generally don't even like movies with car chases in them. Like a car chase to me needs to be like, there needs to be like a ends to the means, right? Like, you need to do it because it's going to get you somewhere else, but like it needs to end. Like, it can't go on for minutes upon minutes upon minutes. Like, 5 minutes top, guys, 5 minutes top. That's all I want to see of cars, which is why I don't like the Fast and the Furious movies. I don't care. I've said it. Come at Case. I'm not anywhere you can find me. And I'm so brave. But the thing is that this film is like incredibly good at using those effects and kind of giving you those like crazy lines. And like, you know, in that first scene, it is kind of great because it establishes so much in that first race, I should say, because not the first scene, but the first race is so good because it establishes so much. It gives you first the exposition of everything that has happened and what happened to Speed's brother. And then it gives you the phantom of like his brother right in front of him. Like, he's like, do you know who you're racing against? And he's like, I do. And I kind of really love that because it's like, there's no one else on that course that can touch him. And he's just racing a ghost, right?
Yeah,
like,
I love that they did the video game, like Ghost Racer trope, like the time trials in Mario Kart or whatever.
So
like, I loved that thing. I loved how that scene played out as a whole. It was like, just really leaning in to what this movie is.
And then it shows you like how much he loves his brother, because we know as the audience that he could have kept his foot on the accelerator and he could have beaten his brother's time. But he, despite his brother being defamed and having some people say really horrible things about him and all the things that happened, he still respects and loves his brother and loves the fact that his brother's like lead time is still up there and he doesn't want to crush it. He just wants to be behind it. And that sets up so much about Speed's character and his relationships in this movie that it's actually really wonderful. So kudos for that first part of the movie.
Yeah, that scene I think does a lot of really good work. My big takeaway on this movie though is that I think that everyone gets thrown in really into the deep end right off the bat. And I think that scene, like, on the one hand, it's great that we're going to be like, okay, so all the weirdness of the setting, all like that's just going to be part of this movie. Every shot is going to be real fucking weird. Like, you think you're in the suburbs and that they would just shoot like normal grass? Nope.
It's the most highly saturated, greenest grass you've ever seen in your life, and it will stay that way the whole time.
Yeah.
I think it's because somehow they're like channeling the 60s, but they also want it to feel timeless. And that's one of the things that throws you off. And not just about this movie, but like the whole entire film. I remember at one point looking at someone's clothing and being like, where are we in time? Like the setting and the house and the family dynamics and like some of the things that some of the people are wearing feels like the 60s.
Oh, and some of the dates too, because they like talk about like the 42 Grand Prix.
Right.
And I wanted to go back and I didn't have time to like confirm that it was like the 1942, but I think it's supposed to be that. And like certainly the images look like it. So we're in like some sort of like abstract future past.
Yeah, it's a little like retro futuristic, but it's not quite other than the fact that there is a crazy giant city with blimps and all sorts of hyper, advanced racing related technology. There's nothing objectively confirming like this is the future or this is the past. Just
right. So it's really weird. So your body kind of like there are things around you that makes you think, oh, this is like the 1960s and the 1940s, maybe because of the way they're dressing, the way they talk, especially the family unit, right? Like their house reminds you of like a house that would be in a 60s sitcom, that kind of thing. But then you go down to the world and like even like Richmond, he shows up and he's got like something that looks like the most amazing cell phone. I mean, it's tiny, but it's like able to decipher things. It looked like several languages could be typed into that thing. And it's just like a little memo pad for him. Like, I'm going to do this, and like the car technology is like definitely even more advanced than what we have right now. Like honestly, there is no time in this actual movie. Like there's no time setting for this actual movie. And that can be disorienting for people.
Yeah, there's so much with the setting, but the other thing about that opening race being what it is in terms of being the deep end is that it also is a lot of exposition right off the bat. And I feel like for people coming into this movie, they are either on board or they're not. And like, that's where the split occurs. Like if you're not eased into this world, like you're immediately experiencing all of it. Like, oh, you're not ready for the Racer X drama going on. Like, the long lost older brother who he looks up to. Like, if you're not already prepared for all of this stuff about the characters, then I don't think the movie ever does anything to like hook you again. Like later on, like you're like, for fans of the franchise, like it all makes sense because everyone knows all the details about, the main story thing that everyone like remembers about Speed Racer as a thing. It's like, oh yeah, there's Racer X. He's so cool. He's also Speed's brother.
Racer X, unbeknownst to Speed, is his long lost brother, Rex Racer.
Right. Exactly.
The opening, the narration that occurred in every episode of the 60s show.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, can we just like pause for a moment? And like all the names are so on the nose, but like the fact that them. Racer X is
Racer
Rex
X
Race.
is Rex
so
Racer.
Racer Rex. Like he's not even not having his name. He's just like reversed the order.
So a lot of the names are you can tell they come from a very old anime. In a lot like Pops Racer, Speed Racer, Speed. They named their child Speed, and his last name is already Racer. But then with a lot of the newer characters, mainly I think it's just Richmond, who is a very wealthy villain. Royalton, right? Pretty on the nose. It tells you everything you need to know about his character right off the bat.
Right. It's actually because we did, like the last time we were talking was on your show for the Muppets, where they're doing the same thing, where they're just like, you know what? We had all these notes about like what this character is supposed to be archetypally speaking. And rather than put in a name generator or like flesh it out or anything like that, what if we just lean into it? What if we're just like, yep, it's John Bad Guy here.
But that's basically the spirit of the piece. Like I think it's a great choice. Like screw it. Like everyone's just gonna be exactly what they say it's going to be.
Yeah, I think it's a good like
inspector detector.
That is from the cartoon. I know. The movie.
I know. Like they're all very on the nose.
They're very on the nose. I think that's part of what makes it a good adaptation of the cartoon. Is that the pieces that it commits to are goofy, sure, but just seem to work for the world that they've created, even as little. I think to the strength of this movie, because it is again long. They probably could have trimmed some of the races down. Maybe we open on a scene that is not a race. It's young Speed, and it sets up a lot of the family dynamics that then kind of get rehashed in the immediate subsequent scene.
Right.
But I appreciate that they do not spend too much time world building. I think that sometimes the Wachowskis have a habit of wanting to be like, look at this expansive universe we've created. Looking at you, Jupiter Ascending. There's so much cool stuff happening in the background, and it's not relevant to the plot of this movie. And here, with that first race that we see, you kind of get pushed right in to here is what you need to understand about this movie. There's a lot of really crazy races going on. This family really ingrained in it. This is what we're going to be following. Please do not worry about what is behind the mysterious futuristic city curtain over there. That is problems that do not affect the plot. And for as much as they did make any editorial choices, I think that is one of the ones that lets it flow a little better, even if it does maybe leave you wanting to know more about what time does this take place in necessarily.
Well, I agree with that too. And especially because comparative to one of my main criticisms, although I have so many, of Jupiter Ascending is that they get so lost in their world building that they never actually complete any of their theses or any thoughts. And so it just feels like there's too much. Like we did that on the podcast. And my thing was like, you fix it by making it a show because there's too much happening. There's too much happening there. And I appreciate the way that they threw everything in. Now, I do have prior knowledge of Speed Racer. And so maybe Case is right. But honestly, like, get in the car or turn off the movie. This is Speed Racer. We don't have time to go slow. Go, go, go. Like, I think that this opening is probably the best part of the movie. In fact, the opening and the end is the best part of the movie.
Oh, that final race.
Everything that happens
beautiful
in the middle is lukewarm to okay. And that's fine. It's fine. There's some funny moments. I'm not taking anything away. But the opening starts really strong and the end finishes really nice, which is why, like, I ended the movie with a smile. It's just getting through all the high drama in the middle that was a little more arduous. Not because it was necessarily bad, but there were some scenes that I think ran a little too long that felt like not even just the race scenes, but I think some of the dialogue stuff ran a little too long and like were not good. There was actually good like character development for Pop Racer. Like I think like he actually had a nice arc. You know, he learned his lesson. He tried not to make the same mistake with Speed that he made with his elder son, who is now secretly Speed. Racer X.
Racer X, who unbeknownst to Speed is his older brother, Rex Racer.
Rex Racer, Racer X, you know. I don't know how the family does not get it, really. But,
Right.
but that's part of the joke, right? Like that's part of the running joke. So I think that there are things, and I think that they at least tried with characters, like they tried to give characters more, because the animated, there's not a lot of life in some of the characters. So yeah, I think it's a valiant effort. I just think that there were places that needed to be cut down. I don't know if the last, like the conversation between Royalton and Speed when he's like turning him down, it goes on a little longer than it needs to go. Like I think there are some really good moments in there. I think there's like value to hearing like Speed being like kind of wanting to stay virtuous and true to this idea of like the integrity of racing as an art and not a commodity. And I think that that's really good. But there are parts of like Royalton's speech that I think could have been like cut down, and like, because we already heard it before. He gave us his spiel. Like he showed us his factory. We don't need him to sell us again. And I feel like some of it felt a little like the nail's already in the wall and now we're just like banging it harder. We're just cracking the wall. Like we don't need this.
Yeah, but I feel like that's the core Wachowski of this movie here. Like that scene specifically feels like the things that are going on in like Matrix Resurrections, where it's like, okay, we're just gonna stop and we're gonna talk about our experience working within a studio system and why like we aren't really doing the same things anymore. Because you know, in this scenario, car racing is just movie making. Like all the contract stuff, like those have to be based on like boardroom meetings that they've had. You know, like coming in and being like, okay, so you're good at your job, but the thing that makes money is actually having a strong marketing arm behind it and having like this thing behind it and having like budget to do these special effects and all the things that you want to do with your movies. Like like you need us, and like we're owned by Disney, or we're owned by Warner Brothers, or we're owned by whatever. I mean, you know, like one of the things that are external to this movie not doing well is that it opened the week after Iron Man. And in terms of like demographics, I have to imagine that there's a pretty strong overlap. We're talking about beloved properties from the 60s that have been updated in ways and that have charming actors put inside them. And like one is this like kind of witty update that like blew our minds in terms of like how you could depict what had been thought to be an impossible power set to have like an interesting engagement for a character. You know, like he's wearing a helmet all the time, so you don't get to see his face, but the heads up display kind of view screen like blew our minds in terms of how they displayed it all. Cool. Like the actual armor being able to function because it was like effective enough CG that it looked like it was real enough, like blew our minds as well. Like there are all these things about it that like were great. And then you got Robert Downey Jr. being so damn charming, and like there's and this is why I feel like Speed Racer would benefit from being younger. It aged up a lot of the stuff. Like it feels like it's a mature character who's like he sleeps around with women, and or mature might not be the right word. Adolescent fantasy character here. Like he sleeps around with women. He drinks a lot. He like hangs out with soldiers, and they like talk about how he like hooked up with all the, was it Playmates or Maxim? It doesn't matter. Like it, you know, it's all very bro-y and like very like, look how like fucking cool this guy is. And then a week later, we have this way more earnest movie come out that's coming from the same roots, though. And so that audience is already like, no, I'm just going to go see Iron Man again.
I do think that I think you have a point. Like, this is definitely a movie which should not be PG. It needs to either go up or down. I lean up for, I think, kind of similar reasons to Sam, what you were saying, but there's a lot of fluff in the middle of the movie where there's just kind of extra things happening. I think something that's really strong about this is that they are adapting this older property and trying to make it more relevant to a wider audience. But I think in doing so, they lost sight of some of the stuff that they really nailed. Kind of aging up this character, even if he's supposed to be the same age that he's in the cartoon, in modernizing it. I don't think there's a good way to take this character as it existed in the 60s and keep it so childish and still create a movie that is as engaging as they did. I think some of the times where you really see the childishness come through are from the child character plotlines, Spritle and Chim Chim. Admittedly, some of their hijinks, I was like, we don't need as much of this as we're getting.
Yeah. Listen, I love Chim Chim, not taking anything away from that lovely chimp. However, that child is disturbingly annoying. And I'm sorry to say, it's disturbing to me because I try not to be harsh on children. It's not the kid. It's not the actor. I'm not attacking the actor. He was just doing what he was told. But heaven for Betsy. I mean, stop answering the door if you're going to run screaming from it every time. At least he's consistent. Like, he's consistent in his being annoying. But I found him very grating. The monkey, amazing. And Chim Chim Cakes,
monkey,
cookies.
Played by 2 monkey actors, as credited.
Amazing professionals.
Yes.
They should have won awards. They were wonderful. Enjoyed it very much, even though they play a murderer. And I'm okay with that because it's self-defense and they are innocent, and that is fine. Sometimes bad guys need to be slaughtered with a wrench to their head. Direct blow. It's just the way it goes.
Gets it to why I think it should be PG-13, because it felt like the Spritle and Chim Chim scenes a lot of the times, and then the colorfulness of the cinematography and the art production design are what kind of de-aged it. But the violence and the brutality of the races, I think, makes them more engaging, because if I was just watching Mario Kart level antics without seeing consequences, I don't think I would have been as pulled into like the actual adrenaline of the races we were watching and the urgency that they were all feeling. I think it would have kind of taken me I mean, obviously in this scenario, I'm not the G target audience for it. So maybe there's a case to be made for that. But for me, at least, like, I think committing to the PG-13 rating and accepting like, hey, we're going for a slightly older skew, probably not adults, but definitely not children, could have helped in the marketing push for this to prime people for what they were actually going to be watching, as opposed to taking it down and then having parents show up and be like, hey, this is not what I signed up for. If it was the movie as released, obviously, if they scaled back on some of the violence and everything, I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also is dealing with like the issue that like Speed Racer itself is more violent than people remember. Like I watched a video last night of just like, here's all the times where like they just like open fire and
I've seen that compilation.
Yeah. Like it like media that was consumable by children in general has sort of shifted away from some of that violence, and also especially like foreign media that like used to just be like, oh well, it's a cartoon, we can just put it up on TV. And even if it was meant more for like all ages, like American perception of a lot of this stuff is like, oh, it's for kids. And so I think a lot of people took Speed Racer as being like inherently youthful as a property, and you know, it's got a little kid with a pet chimpanzee that's like running around, and like that
in
that
all
looks
of the
really
trailers, doing little trailer antics. When you its main tie-in campaign is with candy brands marketed to children, and then parents would see the trailer and be like, I don't know if I should bring my kids to this because it seems like there's a lot of gratuitous violence. And it just kind of feels like it feels like it was stuck between two ratings. It landed on PG, and that's not really where it should have been. It should have gone to either direction. Personally, I like it going to PG-13 more. I think that it allows them to do something more fun with the franchise and with the concept of it all. I don't think this movie should have a sequel in any form of the word, so Raimi franchise isn't appropriate, but with the property, as opposed to going PG, I think that it ends up making a slightly better than average kids movie, when instead it could be this fun, different action piece. But, you know, teach them.
I would like to say, because I felt I was a little harsh on Spurtle, I will say that the first scene with him and his lovable chimp watching an anime and then like getting so into it and like kind of like the cartoon background coming out where they were going to battle, I actually thought that was really wonderful. I thought it was like a good like fun nod to like just general anime cartoons, that kind of thing, and the way that kids get into that, and also to set us up for the violent nature that both of those characters truly inhabit. It's just innate in them, clearly. So I thought that actually set me up for where they were going to go with their characters. And I want to give a thumbs up to that scene. And thank you for the warning.
I don't think all of their antics should have been cut from the movie, but I definitely think they could have cut back a little. Like, I don't need to see like a full 5 minutes of them going through the factory on different mopeds and things.
I think it's important for them to like do a couple of sneaky things. Like I think the sneaky moment, like when they snuck in the back of like Speed's car, when he's talking to Trixie. By the way, I would cut some of that scene because I was kind of uncomfortable. Like I was like, I'm a grown adult and I shouldn't be uncomfortable. The dialogue in here makes me cringe a little bit. Like I don't know why. Just 2 or 3 lines. Like it just needs to be like a little bit shorter, and our savior, Spurtle, needs to come up sooner. And in that scene, I think that's good because we want him later on to come out during the race and show that he has a propensity for like sneaking into places he doesn't belong. And we need him to kind of pop up there. So I think that's fine. But there are a couple of scenes like, you know, like even in the factory, like he follows Speeds to Royalton's factory when he goes to turn him down, and there's all these scenes where it's cutting away to him and running around like messing things up, and I was just like, oh, are they going to use that like is Royalton going to use that as leverage, like, oh, these kids have done property damage, but instead he just kicks them out. So I was like, so there's actually no reason to actually have them here. Like I thought it was
well, they did see the car spears or whatever they were called.
They did. They see. Yeah. They did see the spear hook, I guess. But I was just like, I just felt like there was too much screen time for them for that to be the only thing.
Yeah. I fully agree. Like, I agree. Kid sidekicks in general are hard to get right, especially as media has sort of advanced. Like an argument to be made about, you know, this is a superhero thing, even if it's not like officially like it's not a comic book superhero, but it's still like, yeah, no, he's this impressive person who, with the power of his impressive driving, is able to stop crime. Like that, like that's Speed Racer right there.
Yeah.
Like a lot of media now allows us to, or puts our viewpoint with the hero, with the superhero. Whereas a lot of like Golden Age and like early stuff would put the viewpoint for the child audience in a child character existing in this world, where look at the cool older brother. Like in this case, literally, like Speed Racer is the cool older brother. And we relate to Speed Racer in the same way because he was also dealing with the cool older brother in the form of, you know, Unbeknownst to him, like Sir
Unbeknownst
Rex,
to Speed, Racer X, his older brother Rex Racer, long lost in the Maltese ice caves.
Yeah.
But media just has moved away from that kind of presentation. Like typically we actually want our viewpoint character to be the protagonist of these interactions, which is always it is the difficulty that like Superman has nowadays, because when Superman is viewed from the perspective of Jimmy Olsen, it's easy to be like, oh, well, yeah, no, he's fucking rad. But when you're like, oh, but I am Superman, then you have to deal with angst. You have to deal with like an internal monologue. You have to deal with all the stuff that like isn't necessarily going to be as interesting when the character doesn't have any sort of like faults and foibles. So with here, they're adopting a thing that is from just a bygone era of media that we just don't really deal with the same way. And it's hard to make it fit.
Can I also just say that he lost the lottery on family names?
Yeah,
Like-
right?
Right.
Like, I was actually
Rex,
thinking how messed that was.
Speed.
Right?
Bridal.
Spritle. Like, what? Why? Is it just because you were so sad about Rex that you were like, well, this one we're going to not give like a super racer name. Like,
Can't
we're going
give him a racer name or he'll just
No.
go down the exact same path as his other two brothers.
It's still not going to be like Adam or like Matt. Hi, Matt.
We're also
but-
talking to a family where one man's name appears to be Pops with no given first name other than
Right.
that. Pops Racer, full stop.
Yep. And
Yeah.
Mom Racer. And they lean into that in here. And
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Like, I
Yes.
think it's great in that regard. And God damn it, of course, the older brother died in a car wreck and his name was Rex. Ah!
It's very sad.
Yeah.
But I guess, you know, they just don't want to jinx that third child. Just give him a safe name.
Yeah. I mean, his last name is still Razor. So no matter what, he's still got a cool name of some form. Like at a certain point, if you just have like a gnarly last name, like they'll find a nickname for him. He'll be like Skip. He'll be like Skip Racer. Or something.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
but like,
Big
don't
upgrade
you
from
feel?
Spritle to Skip.
I know.
I mean, like that.
I-
like Skip is not a name that you could easily make work. But if your last name is Racer, it works.
I know that I'm derailing this whole thing, but don't you feel like don't you feel like you would feel like your parents had lower expectations of you?
Sure, but their first son they named the manner that he died, as far as they understand.
true.
No,
So-
they named him Rex, which is like, it stands for king. Like they fucking named him king, dude.
I know, but it's also car Rex. Like,
I know, like, but they named him Rex. Okay, that's a
Yeah, no,
cool
it's true.
name.
It's a cool name. It's a cool
T-Rex. Rex is the king of, like, that's a
Yeah.
cool name.
the bigger issue is that they named the middle child the one who very clearly has ADHD and has like severe learning difficulties, and none of the parents or teachers are like prepared to deal with the fact that it's like no, he's hyper fixated on racing right now and he cannot pay attention in class. Like, problem student. Like no, clearly a child that you need to treat. They named him fucking Speed. Like,
Well,
what
I
were
mean,
your hopes for this child?
They didn't know that he was gonna be like neurodivergent. They just named him Speed. We have derailed this completely.
Yeah, I do. One final point on this. I do think that the only thing that would make me as Spritle feel worse is that there's a close family friend whose name is Sparky, which is just better. And he's not even related to me. It's just another guy with a cool name who's been brought in.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. Sophia hit the nail on the head. You know what? I take it back. I understand why the kid's annoying now. I'd act out too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I didn't hate him, but it is too much with him.
Mm-hmm.
Like the scene where it was too much, especially, was the factory scene, which is what you mentioned, Sam. Like, that's so there were some Wall-E vibes going on there with them all kind of moving around. That was probably the spot where the unreality of everything was just a bit too much for me.
Yeah.
Like, they're all on like, it was like Segways or like.
It is Segways because recently they did a big Wachowski storage auction and the Segway from Speed Racer was up for auction and it went for thousands of dollars.
Yeah, so like they're all like racing around with it. There's a lot of white going on in addition to lots of all the colors, and it's a lot of people on green screen, and it's just so much visually speaking. And then they're causing havoc, and it just felt like, oh well, we're required to do the scene. And I even though I can defend that, like ultimately it was like cool, they uncover the thing that that Royalton is hinting at how they're going to cheat. I didn't think that was necessary.
Yeah,
I thought it was bad.
And mixed in with that, too, is they're kind of doing their big wipe movement through Royalton giving his big speech about capitalism and the true heart of racing, while Speed is also simultaneously losing a big race that they're also kind of cutting to. So there's a lot going on in this scene already.
That part I like, though. I really liked him explaining how he's going to lose.
Yeah,
the thing. I love the Royalton explaining how he's going to lose. I love seeing that happen in real time in the race. But every once in a while, they would also just throw in a Spritle and Chim Chim antic because they have to uncover the spear hook in the same scene. And I think that they could have taken out a lot of the Spritle and Chim Chim cutaways and instead just focused entirely on the very dramatic crisis moment that's happening. And at the very end, we can remember that they're there because really it wasn't important to be constantly aware that they were in the factory. So I think this is a good example of like one of the places in the film that they could have done some editing to maybe tighten the runtime a bit and also help take out some of the more like harder to translate elements from the original cartoon.
I think also like at this moment we have like a, you're having a very serious moment and they're throwing in this what is supposed to be funny. It's not. What's supposed to be funny comedy moments. And I guess maybe that's also to maybe if someone brought children to keep them engaged. But it feels actually distracting from the actual message and makes the message and that scene feel more long-winded than it ought to feel. And so like instead of infusing fun, it actually drags that whole sequence down. Even though like technically it's like actually a very good framing device, right? It's like it's very similar to what we saw in the beginning, except the beginning is reflecting on the past. And then this is a glimpse into the future. And it's like it's happening, like he's saying it, what's going to just happen. And then you come out of this spiral and exactly everything that was in that speech is what's happened, right? And that's really great because it's a nice bookend from like that first half of the movie. But because you have all of these scenes with Chim Chim and Spurtle just like coming in and like infusing what should have been fun, it just feels a lot more long-winded. It feels really, it takes a while to get to your actual point.
Right. And this movie is too long across the board for the PG version of the movie that it is. Like, especially the G cut that I'm going to pitch later. Like, this movie can't get away with its runtime, even honestly, if it was a more mature audience. And that's the only scenario where you could even like pretend that like an over 2 hours long living cartoon is like an okay setting. Like having it be over 2 hours and a PG movie, and you're like, oh well, we padded out the scene with extra like bits of the kids running around. I'm like, the length is the first problem. Like the kid sidekick is the secondary thing. Like no, like the audience is checked out because the scene's too long, not because like, oh, we didn't have to spend enough time with our 8-year-old. Like that's classic Wachowski problem. Yeah. That said, before we move on from Spritle, really from Chim Chim, I want to bring up, two things. One, I want to explain why we keep calling Chim Chim a murderer. Because we've alluded to it a few times. So Chim Chim at multiple points picks up a monkey wrench, and uses it to beat people over the head with it. It's played for laughs, or at least as much as laughs in a fight are. There's like no blood. It's just like, oh, I got hit really hard, doozy, and like fall over kind of stuff. But it is a chimpanzee beating a person with a piece of steel. That in the Fast and the Furious movies is why Dominic Toretto goes to jail. And Dominic Toretto is not as strong as a chimpanzee. So that's why we're calling Chim Chim a murderer, because I went on a tear on Twitter, which might still exist when this episode drops, that you can find about how Chim Chim is a murderer. So that's what we keep alluding to. But also, Chim Chim created some problems for the production because one of the two apes bit someone on set.
Innocent. I don't believe it. It was that person's fault.
Oh, I'm sure that the circumstances were pushed, and then the trainer hit the ape, which was also bad. And so like the American Humane Association like had problems with him, and PETA had problems with him. Now, I don't really care what PETA thinks about anything, frankly, but the fact that, there was violence done towards a chimpanzee is a problem.
Yeah.
And they were in that circumstance, which is a problem. And, I realized it was 2008 where we hadn't really nailed how to do like fake animals quite yet. Like, if any movie could have gotten away with it, it could have been this one. But I also understand just wanting to have a chimpanzee like an actual chimpanzee.
Yeah, there's kind of the old adage in film, like, what are the two things that are the worst to work with on set? It's children and animals, because of very reasonable child labor laws, and also animals are animals, and sometimes they're just not going to do what they're trained to do. And so anytime you put one in a movie, there's bound to be some chaos behind the scenes. I'm surprised there's honestly not more of it in this movie.
Right. Yeah. So I just think having an actual chimpanzee was like playing with fire, and people actually got burned, including the chimpanzee. So I don't know. I mean, this is post the King Kong movie with Andy Serkis. We could have gotten Andy Serkis doing a trifecta of gorilla or of ape presentations.
I was like, ooh. I was like, what are you doing, friend? Let's get their species right. We just went through 5 movies.
I know.
You got to be on this.
You got to be careful. Our ape overlords will be listening to this archive.
That's true. When genetic testing brings back Gigantopithecus, we will all be crushed under the thumb of the massive orangutans.
When they choose their pet servant humans, I plan to be on the list. And if you're not with me, you're going down, friend. I'm selling you out. That's all I'm saying.
I will do my best. I'm pretty sure I've made it very clear that I'm a big fan of apes. So hopefully they'll be like, oh yeah, no, we like this one.
He knows so much.
It just keeps talking about how the differences in wrist structure between gorillas and chimpanzees indicate that they separately evolved knuckle walking. Anyway, moving on. I just wanted to bring up that part.
I'm proud of you and ashamed of you.
Yes, of course. So, let's be clear. I am a monster. So the movie is definitely trying to like play with this like 60s aesthetic. We talked about how like, it's got this style that like we can't, it's retro future, yada, yada, yada. I love some of the spots that they do in it. Like when we see the inside of their house and we see the flat screen TV, but it's still shaped like a CRT. Yeah. I was like, fuck, I want that flat screen TV. And like, that was before like flat screen TVs were becoming, I mean, like they were obviously on the rise. Like this is the era where like plasma TVs were like $10,000 instead of now it's like, a couple $100. Like, oh my God, I loved the way they made all this like future tech feel like also kind of homey at times. Like that was really cool.
Yeah.
I think that carries over into a lot of like the production design just kind of broadly too. Cause like if you look at the way that Emil Hirsch is dressed and styled for this movie, his hair is like a little bit blue in the way that maybe a cartoon character with black hair would have like that slight tint to it. And some of his costumes are racer clothing in the color palette of the classic ascot look from the cartoon. And I think they do a good job of kind of melding the older aesthetics and carrying the spirit of that over. Like you were saying with the flat screen that looks like this rounded retro TV, like it's the spirit of the old show, but it clearly exists in a modern sensibility and a modern design sense.
Yeah. The style choices I thought were across the board, just like, fucking perfect. I loved all the different racetracks having like very different kind of settings to it. Like those all look great. I love. So one of my problems actually with this movie is that we don't get the big rundowns of racers until the later races. It's like basically a thing for the second half of the movie. And I love that we get these like weird casts of characters where it's just like, here's all the racers that we're dealing
oiler,
with.
Like, girl exactly. Who throws beehive. Like,
so, some of the puns were ridiculous. I had a visceral sense memory when we got to like the Viking team, where like, this is not a Beowulf rant. Sam, this is not.
But I was preparing myself. I was.
No, I actually.
I was like just like waiting for you to be like, and it reminded me of Grenville, and I was gonna be like, I'm done. I'm out. Goodbye.
Nope. Although they do throw bees, but because
they
they're
do throw bees.
Like this movie was just unlocking memories for me left and right. And so one of those unlocked was like, oh, right. I remember like we just one weekend at my fraternity in college had a Viking night where we all made tinfoil like Viking hats and like bought like stuffed animals that we like shredded to make like fake furs that we'd like wear. And then we just ordered like 15 buckets of KFC and just like we're like just gross eating meat together. And I was like, oh man, this like that feels like that. Oh, and they're being bribed with the same kind of pageantry in this weird retro future setting. I loved it. Like, I love that we're not even going to deal with like trying to explain like, oh, why are there Vikings?
It's just
Why
fun.
the fuck not?
Yeah, why not?
A lot of those characters too are ported over from like Snake Oiler was frequently a villain in Speed Racer episodes past. So like it's also kind of a nice little like Easter egg for people who know what's going on. My favorite version of this is there is the monster car, which is one of my dad's favorite episodes of the cartoon. It's this big red truck that Racer X kind of does a whole spy mission in the beginning of the movie with.
Yeah,
which,
I love that scene.
really fun scene. Maybe they could have cut it down a little bit in terms of how much it's actually relevant to the whole movie, but it's super, super fun. But that big red truck, that's the monster car from the Speed Racer cartoon. Snake Oiler, he's a frequent villain from it. So I think that they're really like pulling from the elements that are fun and goofy in all the right ways and just kind of like dropping them into the world that they already fit into because they've done a lot of the scene setting to make everything just sort of be suspension of disbelief accepted, and then you get to just kind of party it up with the with all of these various different villainous car drivers that all have their own motivations, whether that's furs and meat for the Viking team or just a lot of money for like the Pink Lady team that's also there.
Yeah, there were moments that felt very like 66 Batman to me.
Yeah.
Specifically that the truck scene with Racer X, especially like when all the goons are like grabbing guns and go into like the doors, and you're like, oh, they're on a truck, because like at first you're like, oh, they're in an office. But then when the racers are all like all themed and all bribed, and it's like, okay, let's beat people up. But especially the Racer X stuff, because Racer X really, I had a moment where I'm like, oh, you could just do this with like the Batmobile. And like, it's like, no, okay. So it's just Batman in this moment here. And like, that's awesome. I fucking adore these moments here.
I also love the fact that the bad guy had piranhas, because like as a kid growing up, like there were two things, especially in 80s cartoons, that were the scariest things, and there was quicksand and piranhas.
I was going to say, it's like I knew you were going to say quicksand was the other thing, because I was like, yes, those two. That's
like the one thing missing from the Casa Cristo race is no one fell into any quicksand when they were going through the desert.
Exactly. Like honestly, like I was waiting for the quicksand, because I it's so funny. Like I really like, there was a time in my young life as a child where I was like preparing myself for quicksand and for piranhas. I don't live in a place where either of those are even present, but it just seemed like such a big thing. And so like I got the piranhas early on, and of course like I always love when a bad guy loves an evil animal. Like well, not evil, I mean it's not evil, but like an animal that can do lots of damage and treats them like they're babies. I always love that. Like, oh no, my babies, they're gonna die. And it's like, sir, they would eat you, but I love that he loved it. So I love that. But yeah, I felt really sad that there was no quicksand in the desert. I mean, like, how fun would that have been when they were in the brawl, like with the gangsters, if they had kicked one and one fell in quicksand, and they're like, oh no, quicksand, and then just turned around and just left. I don't know. That would just be for Sam, really. Like,
big knock to Speed Racer that we do not once see a car sinking into quicksand in the middle race of the movie when they have that brawl in the desert.
Yeah, it would have been easy to put in there, and it is surprising once you actually say it out loud. It's like, oh yeah, well they're crossing off all the check boxes. Yeah,
I mean, for me, it could have just been a person. You know, like a lot of those you could have just replaced, because I don't want to make this movie any longer than it already is. Like that is not part of the goal. But any one of those like other shots with someone getting kicked could have resulted in them falling in some quicksand. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, or it could have been a good opportunity to remind everyone about like the quick save feature that they all have. Like if the car fell into quicksand and then like it's starting to sink, and then the green goo like fills up the like cockpit, and then it ejects them. Just to remind you, like this movie is, while there is a lot of gun violence and there is a lot of like piranhas eating body parts and like a lot, like
you don't see a lot of blood. You know, it's like it's violent, but it's not brutal, if that makes sense, in the way that like a Fast and the Furious.
The piranhas only ate one finger in terms of body parts. That other thing could have been from anything. It was just a slab of meat on a bone.
We don't know,
but from what? We don't know from what is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Like I don't know why I'm defending the piranhas, but I just feel like I wanted to be clear. They weren't eating lots of people. Like they weren't overeating. They were just, doing what they got. That's all.
Right. No, Sam, we've established that one of your things is having sympathy for villainous characters in productions that we're looking at, because their motivation makes sense. Like
I never thought that I was that type of person until I joined this podcast. I didn't think that I would be an apologist for so many different villains, but I think the piranhas deserve it. I don't think any of the other villains in this movie deserve it. I think they all deserved it to go down, including the one that Chim Chim murdered. I believe that he had that coming. But the piranhas, that it wasn't their fault.
This is true. But suffice it to say, like, most of this movie, like, is relatively blood free. Like, all the car combat stuff is supposed to be pretty safe. And aside from them cheating, so all like they constantly have this like thread of like, oh, well, there's no cameras here, or there's so much dust, anything could be happening in that cloud. Like, in theory, it's just cars having certain tricks that they can use, but not, like, in terms of like what crosses the line, I'm not really clear, because can we talk about the Mach 5 for a second and how fucking cool it is, but also like I don't like, all right, so the jump thing, all the cars have it. It's the Mach 5's thing, and like in terms of pop culture, like the jump stilts, I don't know what jump jacks. Okay, yeah, like those are so fucking cool. Like it adds like all this element of like movement to a race that is already like fast and going in one direction, but here we add like vertical stuff, and that's so cool. And like all these cars have like tricks like that, and then they have like, again, like a gun or a catapult that throws a trebuchet, if you will. Yes. But the Mach 5 has fucking saw blades that just pops out. And I'm like, how is that legal?
A series of buttons on the front that do different things. Some of them are like sending out a homing pigeon or making it able to go through water, which we don't see too much in this movie because they choose to focus more on the saw blades and the jump jack of it all, which is great for movement. I do think that is kind of part of the reason I want it to maybe skew a little older is that the big villainous item to include in a car is a spear hook that makes you hold on to a car next to you from like underneath, and that doesn't really feel like it is keeping up with the threat level that's been established in all the previous races and what the other cars are doing. Like a spear hook kind of feels like it's underhanded and cheating, but is it dangerous? Maybe not so much.
Yeah, I mean, because like the spear hook is just being Kirby and Smash Brothers and like eating them and then just jumping off the edge. like it's not, and assuming that you can't fly back up or Donkey Kong like picking up. Sorry, we're mixing our video game metaphors here.
It's fine.
But then like the other ones are like, let's have a flail or like, like just, or like three spiked balls on chains, and I'm just gonna spin around as I drive and kill people.
And not for nothing, there's a character Racer X, who unbeknownst to Speed is his long lost brother Rex Racer, at one point flips his car and punches another driver just in the face with his real hand and then lands. Which that is one of my favorite shots of the movie.
It's like, if you've run out of things to pop out of your car, just your fist will do. It was great. I loved that. Totally keep that.
And that whole scramble in that Casa Cristo race is some of the most fun that you can have with the movie. It's goofy, it's silly, it's a little bit weirdly brutal, but everyone in it seems to be having a great time. You get the sense that like both the cast and the characters are loving what's happening. It's fun to watch in the way that it's shot and structured. And I think that losing some of that brutality from that scene would make it a weaker movie, which is why I tend to lean PG-13 as opposed to G.
Yeah, I actually think that when it comes to that scene too, like, because it's like Pop is so opposed to him going to that race because it's supposed to be dangerous. I don't think you can make it any less dangerous because that's kind of what that race is supposed to be.
I think you would need to lean a lot more into the difficulty of the actual driving itself, on like the switchbacks in the mountains, because this is the race that Rex supposedly died in. And so it needs to be dangerous. It needs to be difficult. And I think...
See, I just don't think that dangerous equals necessarily a higher rating. Like, so all of the violence in the actual races are, for the most part, relatively tame. Like, it's not that far removed from either the original cartoon or something like Wacky Racers or Mario Kart. We keep bringing up like that racing has this like kind of potential goofy kind of violence that's not at people. Like, it's still cars on cars violence, which is somewhat sanitized. Like, I don't feel like it has to be like a higher rating. Like, yeah, sure, when Snake Oiler just pulls out a gun, that's a different story. But like, I don't think all the violence necessarily equals like, oh, well, it has to be like a more mature setting, because I think that like I said, what we get in this movie for the most part is relatively tame, even if it's like high stress. And it might be different for someone who's like been in a really bad car accident or something where they have like actual like trauma associated with it. But like, I think for a child audience looking at this, it's just like, oh, wow, cars are cool. Oh, cool. They use the jump jacks to like do a flying kick with their car somehow. Like,
yeah, I feel like the violence is always on the precipice of becoming like Mortal Kombat-esque, but because it doesn't have the higher rating, it can't quite fully commit to some of the like goofy is the wrong word to use to describe Mortal Kombat, but at the same time, it is exactly the correct word to use to describe the combat in like that game in like the 90s movie, like at any point, someone might whip out a high-low bar and do a big spin before they do a kick. And that's hilarious. But also then they're going to kick someone's spine out. And I don't think that I want to necessarily like see the gritty, gory version of Speed Racer. But I do feel like the frequency of the times that we see the like eject feature pop up and like in a G-rated movie, I could see how you might need to like maybe they're beach balls instead of big spike balls on the back of the car or something just a little bit more sanitized to appeal to, because especially for like American G-rated audiences, generally stuff tends to get a little bit toned down. And I think a lot of the strength of this movie is that everything is toned up. And while I don't think you need to push it much, much farther, I think accepting that like, hey, this is what the level we're operating on is. It's not that we are trying to appeal necessarily to like a fully child audience. We are making it a bit more of a mature movie in some ways. Could have allowed it to continue to exist in the levels it did and even maybe push it just a smidge further so that like randomly having a gun pulled out by Snake Oiler is not as much of an abrupt moment as it might have been.
Yeah, I just feel like with this movie, with the level of did either of you have a thought on your most recent watch of like the Hunger Games? I had a moment there when I was watching it where it's like, oh, well, it's not quite that far. And that was like a PG-13-ish level of like what that violence was going to be. It's like, here's a little bit more toned down where it's more like, like the aesthetic of this movie is very similar to like a Spy Kids or a Shark Boy and Lava Girl in terms of like, it's all green screen. It's, live actors kind of stuff. And then it's edited like an epic rap battle of history with like all the crossovers and like the surreal nature of the backgrounds. Like, that's just why I kind of keep coming back to this idea of, well, if it was a little more general audience and because the expectations for what you're going into for this style of movie, like as a movie, as opposed to like an internet video, like people have an expectation of like a certain level of realism in their stuff. And even though like, the next year Avatar came out. I
think that the aesthetic of this movie did a lot to confuse people. And I think that gets to the point of maybe why both of us want to go in different directions, but kind of agree like it can't have stayed PG. It needed to choose a direction. Like clearly the thing that's wrong is the rating and how it was marketed, but like which way should it have gone is the question. And I think that comes down to a matter of opinion ultimately. But for me, this movie's style, while it is bright and colorful and cartoony in many ways, is kind of doing to movie making what like an impressionist painting is doing to art. Like it is like, okay, we understand what a movie is. We know how to make a real movie. Now let's use the medium in new and exciting ways to create something that is all at once both a story that you can consume and a feeling that you can watch. And to me, that they pull it off exceptionally well. I think the Wachowskis did a bang up job of capturing the idea of like, yes, it's bright and colorful, but there's really high level techniques being used in altering it. So like, sure, wiping with a person is a very internet video style of edit to do. I know I've done them in some video edits in the past, but here they're integrated so seamlessly to the very CGI backgrounds that at no point did I necessarily feel like I was watching Spy Kids 3D Game Over, even though they are using a lot of the same technologies to make these movies. And they're doing it on such a higher budget than those movies ever did too. That ultimately, I think, like, as much as the bright and colorfulness of it all is maybe unusual for a big blockbuster release, as this was intended to be, I think it works here to just make this movie more unique. And I think that because it is so colorful, especially, and there is so much CGI, people tend to look at it and say, this is a kid's movie. This is for children. This is for a younger audience. But I think that there is a lot of validity to having a bright, colorful movie intended for slightly older audiences, even if it is a harder sell in the marketing. I think that there's been sort of like this resurgence of people going back to this movie, particularly like online movie people, and being like, wow, this was really good, actually. And the fact that that is coming around is because it is. It's really gorgeous cinematography, very intentionally done. It is an impressionist painting of a movie in its surrealism and its weird color wipes. There could have been, I think, a very strong response from audiences, even though they are normally primed for realism in cinema, to see this and appreciate what it's doing on levels that it's doing it and be along for the ride. Because I think it's almost too much for kids in the same way that it works for a slightly older audience. Like a 5-year-old seeing this would be gripping the arms of their seat, like, whoa!
Yeah, it's like just like blown away by the like literally their skin falling off their face because it's just so bright. There's so much happening. I actually really love the way this movie looks. I think that it's actually like a great nod to like animation in general and this idea of this new kind of weird surreal space that they have you in. Like it actually fits with the fact that we actually do not know what time period we're in. Everything is surreal. This is its own world and we're being sucked into that. And I actually really like it. I love the color. I am very adamant about one of the things that I hate about the DCU is that it's all brown and gray. And I do not like that. I feel like it's very boring looking.
Yeah.
And again, if you're a Snyder fan and you have a problem with that, you know where to find Case because I'm not anywhere you can find me. And I just personally just like, I don't need everything shot in sepia. Like I do not need to see things like that. And so it's so nice when I see things in color. Like automatically I'm going to like that movie more if there is a wide variety of color because I would say like the last 3 decades even, it just feels like the palette for movie making is so dull, gray, black, brown. It's like feeling so real, so gritty. And like you have, like in order to make a serious movie, you've got to, and I really appreciate that this movie leans into the cartoony aspect. Like it leans into the source material, right? You're going to have these moments where there's actual animation coming in. You're going to have moments where like it's basically all green screens. You're going to have, but no matter what, it is going to be colorful. I mean, the end, which is like one of the most beautiful things, when he finishes this
basically
race.
2001.
Yeah.
Where it all just becomes like a blur of color, just like
yes, I love it.
Inundating him.
And he goes through this blur of color and then he stops and there's just silence. And for the first time, there's no music. There's no sound of the crowds, which you had this whole last scene, right? This whole race where he very triumphantly, and they just give this moment of like quiet. And then you just see like, and it almost feels like starlights, kind of blinking and flashing. And you see it on his visor and he lifts it and you see it from his eyes, like, this. And you realize that as it comes, and of course you probably knew it before, but it's all the cameras, it's all the people that are realizing that he won, and it's just such a beautiful scene. It's so triumphant because you're in that moment with Speed. You're like, it feels very intimate because it's very quiet and it's just him like in the moments after, and then it's just like everything rushes in and it's really great. It's really beautiful filmmaking. Like that's a feeling. That's a moment that it's gorgeous.
I wonder if though us having this appreciation for it now is part of that we have been primed to appreciate it more than we were at the time. Like when this movie came out, this is the golden era of orange and teal for fucking everything. Where color correction had gone overboard. Like, yeah, we've started to get into like overly sepia, overly like flat colors on a lot of stuff, like where I might have a couple bright colors in there, but it's being shot literally on flatter color gradient cameras. Like that's the whole Marvel issue. And this is literally coming out a week after Iron Man first premiered. So we haven't gotten there yet. So we're really in the phase of the Michael Bay stuff. And like again, Avatar comes out the next year. Like we're at this point still like seeing a lot of colors in our blockbusters, and this one's just like so much more, but we haven't been starved for it yet. Like we have not learned to appreciate it at the point when this movie came out. And since then we've kind of come back to it and been like, oh yeah, that was good. Why don't we have these anymore? And part of the reason we don't have it anymore is because movies like the original Matrix came out where everything was like kind of green and inside the Matrix and kind of blue outside. And like,
that kind of gets to, I have a lot of film industry hot takes, because I very briefly worked in it before going freelance. And there's this very like sense of literalism in blockbuster filmmaking, especially these days, where it's like we have to show things as they are without changing like the color palette too much. We're not going for like an artful look. We're going for, here is the thing presented very straight. And I think that this movie is much more interpretive, which is a much bigger ask of your audience. And Case, like you're saying, if they're not primed for it and they're not like excited about that kind of artfulness, it's not going to really land with just a general viewer. I think this movie is doing in its style to the Speed Racer cartoon what like Into the Spider-Verse is doing with a comic book, right? Like they're pulling from these sources that are very different from the very literal blockbuster movie. Like Iron Man, I think, looks pretty good all these years later. And as far as MCU movies goes, I think it's one of the better shot ones. Try not to get too spicy on the MCU on this because people can definitely at me. But, you know, it works for that movie. Even though, you know, it's pulling from comic book sources, it's adapting it in a way that makes sense for a blockbuster movie. I think Speed Racer is similarly a triumph of adaptation from the media that it's pulling from. But instead of going into more of pulling it into the framework that we expect a movie to exist in, it's allowing the original medium to shine through in the final product. And that can be difficult to get your audience to get on board with, particularly when they weren't primed for it, which I think that is a good point. Like 2008. This was a pretty unique looking movie compared to what was also in theaters and compared to other movies that people might have associated it with, like The Fast and the Furious.
Yeah.
Right. Which, you know, especially the early ones were very colorful, big race movies. Like, and there's a lot of effects that wouldn't feel out of place in those movies that are in this one. But it's just
styled
like
up to 11.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking that this movie kind of reminds me of the Ang Lee Hulk movie in some regards. And that has a similar issue where there's a lot of very literal tropes from the source material being pulled into, here's the representation. Like the big thing is all like the panel structure on it all. And here, you're dealing with Speed Racer stuff. Like there's shots that are almost like exactly from the show. And like that's very cool. But it is forcing a transition, and it's forcing meta knowledge on the audience, because if you've never seen Speed Racer before, you don't care about like the callbacks to like the original Speed Racer.
Right.
And this movie is just sort of asking audiences to be ready for that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I do feel like they do a decent job just through like the look of the movie of, even if you don't necessarily catch the reference, it's still a shot that works for what's around it. But it does mean that the rest of the movie is being pulled into the levels that like a Speed Racer adaptation works on. So even if you are a fan of the original cartoon and you just aren't ready for this stylistic choice, it can be off-putting. I think that's a big part of why this movie is so polarizing for a lot of people, because it is asking a lot to have someone watch the opening sequence and then continue to watch that aesthetic for another 2 hours. I love it. I think this is super fun. I love a weird artsy movie. I'm a big fan of modern art, but like totally understand that someone might be off-put by a very bright primary color palette with swirling colors, no real hard cut transitions, a lot of very interpretive choices in the edit room. It isn't for everyone. It doesn't have the mass appeal that a lot of blockbusters need. I can't really defend that. It is going to be polarizing.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway for this conversation is that I think we all kind of agree this is, generally speaking, a good movie, but it's not for everyone. And the thing is, it was very expensive, and so that not for everyone is also kind of why it like didn't do very well.
Yeah.
But before we break for pitches, I have one thing I want to bring up that I think might actually like have helped a bit for this movie just in general, which is that the sense of scale, I think, is like really whack in a lot of stuff. Specifically, there's a shot where Speed, they're at the last race and they're in this giant arena, and it's like they're all like looking around and it's like, oh, it's huge, but it's like very level, looking right directly at them, like chest level. It's not at a low angle. Like we're not seeing. Everything is big because we're being informed that it's all big, but like there's no point where like we, the audience, feel like everything is towering over us. And that includes these giant racetracks that they're on. Like the realization of just how big the world that they're in and what the scale of the people are in this world, I think is just not quite there. And I think it's a product of like shooting against flat actors against a green screen and not really taking into account like both angles, but also lenses for cameras. Like I think and maybe that wasn't a thing that they could have even really done at that time. So I don't know, but like, no matter what, there's just multiple spots where the scale of the actors just doesn't feel appropriate for the setting that they're trying to present.
Yeah, I like it when it pops up in relation to like the race cars or the tracks looking larger than life, because in this world, racing is the only thing that matters. And so they should be larger than life. But sometimes it bleeds over into like their house. And at that point, I'm like, I don't know if this weirdness with scale is working for me anymore quite so much.
Yeah, I agree. Like with the racetracks, I always think that it's really cool, especially that like the people are like, near them. Although there was one scene where like the racetrack is right over people's heads. And I was like, I'm sure that's not sanitary or safe, because accidents are clearly happening all the time on these tracks. And also cars leak. Like, I don't know a lot about cars, but I know that they leak, and what they leak is not good. And like,
if your car is leaking a lot while you're driving, you might have slightly bigger issues than the sanitary nature of your racetrack.
Let me just say, though, this is a race where a lot of things get blown up. So some of these cars are definitely leaking.
You know what? The existence of a man named Snake Oiler, whose car does exactly what it sounds like his name implies it might do, is I think maybe vindicating your point.
Yeah. Like, it just doesn't seem very safe to put people under the track. Mm-hmm. And they probably paid more for those seats, like for the danger of it. Just capitalism at work, guys.
Yeah, it's a real like splash zone, like a Gallagher show.
But for gasoline.
Yes. Yeah, so I think we should move on to pitches. So we'll
I do want to say really quickly, sorry. I do think all the performances were very good. Supporting cast, everybody. Just want to throw that out there. There was a lot to talk about in this film that had nothing to do with cast. And that's why we are now breaking for pitches. But I will say that I actually enjoyed everyone's performance in this film.
This is one of my favorite John Goodman performances of all time.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised. I realized I had a note to say something about the cast, and we just kind of blew right through it.
Well, you know what it is? There's just so much to talk about, and I also wasted a lot of our time talking about Squirtle's name. I almost call him Squirtle. See, that's how bad his name is. Squirtle's name, and so
Squirtle would be a much better.
It would. It definitely would. So I apologize to listeners, but it is a very good cast. The movie does run too long, but I do recommend it. And now, Case, we can say go to pitches.
Yeah, we'll segue over to pitches with the stealth that the Nanjas should have had in this movie, and instead
they were Nanjas.
They were.
That's why they didn't have stealth. Mm-hmm. Ninjas have stealth. Nanjas do not.
Nanjas do not. And hopefully we will not get body slammed and then thrown out of a window by John Goodman.
Isn't that the dream though?
No, that was awesome.
Well, hopefully we can help him in body slamming and throwing Nanjas out the window when we come back after this word from one of the other great shows on our network.
Huzzah!
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun, whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen.
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there. So we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.
And we're back. All right, Sophia. So we have a couple of rules on the show, but we have one big rule on the show, which is that I am not allowed to go before Sam. The smaller rule is just like, it's got to be realistic. You can't like propose that an actor who didn't start working until like 2014 was in this movie. But like the big one is I can't go before Sam. So you're our guest, which means that you can say, do you want to take the first swing or would you prefer Sam to take the first swing? Ooh. But either way, I'm just not allowed to go before Sam. So Sam can go first, then I can go, and then you can go, or whatever order. But you have the power.
Oh, I feel so strong. It's like the true heart of racing is coursing through me. I'm one with my car. Sam, if you would like to kick us off, please go.
Sure. So I actually don't have too much of a pitch for this because I actually really enjoyed this film. My main pitch is that it just needs to be tightened up. There's just a lot of stuff in the middle that needs to be edited down. And I don't feel strongly either way on the ratings. I know both of you feel, I feel like I'm the monkey in the middle here, the Mew Mew in the middle, if you will. And I feel that the core things that need to be broken down is that the some of the stuff in the center that is a little preachy just needs to be tightened up. Those speeches need to be tightened up. It's not because the writing is bad. It's just that it's a little long-winded. Like at a certain point, you have to throw out some of your babies so that the whole project survives. And a lot of it sounds like the Wachowskis are up on a soapbox, kind of like talking about purity. And I don't necessarily need that. I think, when we're with Royalton, we just need to kind of edit down, like really remove a lot, not all, but a lot, like maybe even just have them enter the building and then see them seeing the hook. And that's all I want to see of Squirtle and Mew Mew, even though I do love Mew Mew and I hate cutting Chim Chim. Damn it. Why am I renaming things? I don't know. It's Sam. I'm Sam. I do that. Chim Chim and like, I do love him, even though I can't remember his name. So how much does love really mean from me? Big existential question. I'll move on. But I think that it's fine to have them sneak in and have them see the hook. But I think that has to be strategically placed. And I feel like, because those moments didn't work as comedy, and then they just make that scene not work. Also, the scene with Christina Ricci and Speed, where they're kind of being flirty, that was weird, did not really work, made me uncomfortable until the end. Just tighten it up, gets rid of some lines. And then I liked the ninja action, so I'm going to have to cut back on some of like the actual races like early on. I don't think that I think our big Looney Tunes race is what I'm going to call it should stay intact, except add some quicksand for Sam. And other than that, I think some of the races up top just need to be cut down just a little bit. Not the first race, but certainly like some of the stuff in the middle, just because too many cars, not fun. And for me, and I need the movie to be shorter in some places. I actually really like the moment where Speed and his brother speak, even though of course he doesn't know that Rex is, I don't know how, but he doesn't know. And I feel like that needs to stay. But other than that, I'm up for anything kind of being. Also, I think like Rain and his sister and stuff, like all of those scenes need to stay intact because that, that's a very short, like all of their scenes are very short. But yeah, that's basically what I do. I would just try to bring down the runtime because I think other than that, this movie's actually a lot of fun. I think it's got a lot of hijinks, and I think that the best part is probably the big race. I mean, if anything, make that come sooner by cutting down some of those soapbox rants. And yeah, that's what I would do because I really liked this movie. I think it was good. It was fun. Just a little long, like maybe too long, like fold laundry in the middle of it to get through to the end. The end is worth it though. Okay, Sophia, now you get to decide. Do you want to go or do you want Case to go?
Ooh, more choices. Okay, here's another turn in the road. This is great. I'll go next. Just get the thoughts out there. I would argue that this movie should have been pushed to a PG-13 rating and that they should have mostly changed the marketing strategy. I do agree with Sam that I think a lot of benefit could have been taken from another pass through in the edit. Take out some of the Spritle and Chim Chim bits that tend to go on for a bit, maybe trim down some of the dialogues so that we get to the good stuff, which is the races, which is, I think, where the style and the flair of the movie really shine the most. I wouldn't really change much besides that other than the rating. I think that ultimately, like, this movie could have been PG-13 and today, if it was released, it would have been. I would mostly focus on how you're marketing it, because I think a big problem they had in making back their budget was people not going to see it because they weren't really sure what they were about to see. The trailer left a lot of ambiguity over who their target audience was, only further confused by the PG rating. Parents weren't sure if they should take their kids. Teens weren't sure if this was for them because it didn't look like a movie that was intended for them. So my ultimate argument is it's a pretty damn good movie. Just trim it up a smidge take out some of the elements that are kind of pandering to the PG audience and let it be a PG-13 fun blockbuster, more in the vein of a Fast and the Furious. And it might be colorful. You're probably still going to have people who aren't into it. But at the same time, you're going to be drawing in more people who might actually be able to appreciate it on the levels of what it's doing and on its silly, goofy, action-filled bits. I think that there's a lot of merit to letting this movie be intended for folks who might actually go to the movies and have a good time watching it and not have to worry about it being sanitized or whether or not their kids are going to be traumatized after seeing a man's finger get bit off by a piranha.
Fair. Yeah, I think that like we all agree that like an editing pass is just the first thing that has to happen, no matter what else occurs, because it's just too meandering, which is not good on a racing movie. Yeah,
absolutely not. Hashtag let piranhas eat. Sorry. Yeah,
I you know, like we said before, I think I agree in that like teens weren't sure necessarily what this movie was going to be for them, because it's based on a property that was a kid's cartoon from the 60s that doesn't like it does like while it is remembered, it does not have the cultural cachet that some other things really do. Like, so you know, from the standpoint of if you're trying to do like a PG-13 or a slightly more mature one, like that can be cool. Like I think there's a lot of space for like, let's do like a cool grown up ish, or like at least like slightly more mature-ish version of whatever like young person's property. And I think that there would have been a lot of fun for that. So like, I agree. Like you could make it work but then the problem is like, well, but it's coming out right after Iron Man and is it going to win in that like that? Then it's like directly head to head in that scenario. And it's a fight that we know it lost in the real world. So that's kind of like my back and forth on that one. Yeah.
I mean, my answer to that would have been maybe change the release date as soon as you find out Iron Man is coming out right before it. But of course, who could have known at the time that Iron Man was the runaway success that it is? So I think a big push in marketing to try and sell this through the trailers and maybe fewer baby bottle drop promotional tie-ins to be more of what it actually is and more of what we actually see on screen, as opposed to targeting an audience that ultimately didn't turn up for it. Would have worked to its benefit to at least make some of those box office numbers down. I don't really have a good counter argument for could it outcompete Iron Man, because realistically, I don't think it could. Iron Man has much wider audience appeal, but at the time, the MCU was not a thing. People did not know Iron Man was going to be a runaway success, so I see why they didn't necessarily change the release date. And you're not going to change your release date a week out from distribution. That is unfortunately the reality of movie distribution these days.
This is just a moment of speculation, though. Like, the movie that we got, if they had decided to go with a different like big release date cycle, like Thanksgiving weekend or like run up to Christmas kind of era, I'm curious. Now, are racing movies inherently more summery kind of things? I'm not actually sure. None of us are really car people here, or so like none of us are like, oh well, yeah. Like,
well, what's the car season? When does NASCAR
typically
run?
Like
is that in the summer? It's summer, so maybe it is a summer thing. I mean, like I don't know. Like I try not to watch too many things go in circles. I do like racing. I like with people running, like actual humans, not cars. And but like I guess they would think that it's like the racing season. But again, I think to Sophia's point, the people who watched the cartoon, the people who were like involved in the property, their demographic is not children. So then the marketing to market it to children. And like, I think this is like a general problem that we see a lot with films where they'll see bright colors and marketing departments will decide without having actually watched the film or understanding the content of the film that film is actually for children. Like our studio will decide, oh, no, this must be for kids because it was a cartoon and it's bright and it's colorful. But like the people who watched it were watching it in the 60s. Those are not children anymore.
I could have seen this maybe having a December, because this came out in the summer and that's like your typical time release for like a tentpole action blockbuster, which I don't think that this movie would have been a successful tentpole in any situation. I don't think it has enough mass appeal to pull that in. But like a December release where maybe parents who grew up watching the show could take their tween or teen kids to go see it with them as like family movie night. We're all home for the holidays. I think maybe you could have seen some success there because, Sam, like you're saying, the people who have the nostalgia for this are not necessarily the target audience to then go watch this movie. But there's a way to get those to overlap by maybe changing the release date a little bit and switching strategies and how you're pushing the film that could have ultimately resulted in a better box office appeal or better box office ultimately income draw.
Yeah.
Pull money.
Yeah, now I'm thinking like a July 4th would have been.
July 4th would have been.
It looks like fireworks.
Yeah, it looks like fireworks. It's international, which I always enjoy subverting like the rah-rah patriotism component of that. And it's just, it is big and crazy. And even a PG-13 version would be somewhat family friendly, for older kids, but still, but a kind of thing where like you could bring everyone and there's nothing automatically isolating everyone from.
I think there's no scenario where like you want this to be rated R. You pretty much just want to slap a 13 next to the PG and then have the same movie come out.
Right. Yeah. I definitely think there's legs to it. It's just for me personally, getting into my is I think that this is the lost opportunity for the Wachowskis to do like an all ages movie. Like it's already almost there, but they're best known for doing, The Matrix, which was an infamous R-rated movie that was like, oh, it's bucking the trends of all the movies going to PG-13. I think that would have been combined with the bright colors and all the yada, yada, yada. Like, and the fact that it's based on a property from the 60s that was, while itself actually more mature than people remember, perceived as a kid's property. But I think that would potentially open it up to larger audiences to like, if you were really trying to bring your kids to go see it, you would end up with extra sales because like that would help make up the budget. But I think that the actual big issues with it is that it's so expensive and so long. And we agree, cut that shit down. There's too many scenes that are just like, oh, they just keep going. Like all the races should be way shorter. We don't need to see all of any race except for the last one, which should just be the third act. Like, everything up to that point should be like we saw a good chunk of it. And then we have wonderful mechanisms in this movie to cut to other points in time. Yeah. They're all over the place. Like we could have the entirety of Act 2 be races overlapping exposition and like dialogue scenes between people and just going back and forth between them. Because my big pitch for this movie is I think that we need to get into the racing aspect sooner, which sounds crazy, I know, but based on what this movie actually is, because it's pretty fast that we get into it. And like I said, I would tone it down a little bit, but I don't think it needs to be toned down that much. I think that the opening scene that we got with young Speed, I think is too much investment for an audience that doesn't know what they're walking into. They're trying, like they try to be like, oh no, like it's not just going to be the crazy races. Like all the suburbia is also going to look like wild. Is what they're trying to sell you on. But I think we need a slightly darker scene, darker in color or not in tone, a slightly darker scene at the very start to sort of ease people into the surreal world that we're in for. And either that could be a race and not the race that like we're dealing with the Racer X baggage, because that's a lot of exposition to open up with. Like, I think that, I think us seeing adult Speed or however you would describe Emil Hirsch Speed. I would like to have had a scene with him before we were dealing with the whole Racer X baggage. And I realize it's the thing everyone remembers about Speed Racer.
What, you mean that unbeknownst to Speed, Racer X was his older brother Rex?
Right, exactly.
What? No.
It's true.
You don't say.
So either have it be a race, or I would say move that first Racer X demonstration scene, like the him chasing down the truck scene, make that the first scene. Like open with like this whole thing about like about Rain as this racer. We get the same mob scene. I think that works actually really well. And then all of a sudden we have this cool vigilante thing, and we set up this whole issue of all the racers are being bribed, and you set up your initial drama, which is the thing that they're trying to investigate and that you're trying to defeat by the end of the movie anyway. Right. So just open with that and not, and then,
do we get to keep the piranhas?
Yeah, I think you can, because like as long as you don't show like the stump, like even when he has like gauze on it, like that's fine. Piranhas, very big thing in kids' cartoons.
Yeah, I know. I just want to make sure that like I don't know if I'd be on board if the piranhas don't get to be featured. But go on. Yeah, I mean, I'm like, liking
even
it
when
so
it's
far.
Like stick your finger in it. I don't want to, and then they're all, like, we never get a really good close up. You just don't show the bloody stump. Like have him immediately cover it with a rag, and like I don't think that's gonna like.
We don't actually see the bloody stump till later when Squirtle. Well, I'm gonna call him Squirtle from now on because I like it better. Squirtle like flicks it to hurt him in the fight between the two of them. So, like, honestly, you never really see it.
Yeah, so I don't think that those would be the things that really push us into too adult of a setting. And I realize censors also change in terms of what's acceptable all the time. What used to be okay for PG-13 is now barely an R at this point, because weirdly, as much as like we like to talk about the society becoming more degenerated, like it's actually kind of the reverse in a lot of our standards of things.
Like MPAA ratings get more conservative with time, even though the ratings themselves are not changing in label. It's strange.
Yeah, and that was a big thing. I mean, obviously, when new ratings are introduced, that was an issue with, like, I'm thinking about like The Wild Bunch, for example, when it was like resubmitted for rating, and it was like, oh, it's an X. It's like, oh, okay, that's a problem. or things like The Goonies, where it's like, okay, like early PG-13 can get away with a lot more stuff. I think there's a chance to get it down to G, and that just opens up more audience. And I think that as long as you're eased more into the lush world that we're in, I think it's okay. Like, I don't think you need to change that much there. But like I said, it needs to get trimmed down like crazy. And I would love to see more of these like crazy rosters of racers earlier on in the movie. Like, it only really starts showing up in the later races. But we should have, for one thing, if we're going to have lots of races throughout, we should have recurring people established early on. And like, maybe you don't go into like all the corrupt ones or anything. And like, maybe only a few of them make it to like the later races, but like start that whole like fighting game montages that they do towards the end of like, look at our, like, all right, so we got the Vikings over here. We got the pretty ladies over here. Like, lean into the wacky races part of it all. Like, that's why we're here for Speed Racer and not for Fast and Furious. Like, they're all in weird, goofy cars with like strange themes and like odd gimmicks that are kind of legal in this weird street racing scene, or not street racing, in this weird racing scene. Car Formula One racing. I don't know. Like,
Speed
like, lean
racing.
into that. Like, give us this cast of characters that Speed is racing against, and then reveal the corruption behind it all. Like the pageantry that he is playing a part in, that he unwittingly is not like skimming off the top the way everyone else is. Like, and we start to realize that all these characters who are there with these like weird gimmicks are there with these weird gimmicks because they're being paid to do things in specific ways. Like, I think we could have. I think that gets us hooked into the conflicts between some of the characters a little bit earlier. And again, I think you can trim it all down because we have wonderful devices to jump between scenes really quickly and not have it like require like tons of setup time and everything. So that's my big thought there. Like, just like opening scene and like trim everything down.
Yeah.
You know,
I could see that too. I mean, like, I could even cut the whole first scene of him like in school. Like, no offense to young, Speed, because the actor was great.
Yeah.
The two
Nicholas
little,
Elia, and then Ariel
Winter is young Trixie.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that yet, but like,
they were both great, and it was really a cute scene, like with his teacher and everything like that, and showing the obsession. And it was actually really lovely to see his relationship with his brother, to kind of establish that, which is the only reason why I didn't put it in my initial cut, because I just feel like, like I liked that, like that resonated with me, like their relationship, so that you get this feeling that Speed really like loves him. But like, you can kind of do that with the race too, where he's chasing the ghost. You can kind of get there. Like, I'm not sure how much emotional payout it gives us to actually keep everything. At the very least, it should be trimmed down. Like, we don't need everything that's in that scene.
Yeah, all that flashback stuff at the opening, I think, could have been intercut later in the movie, because I think that the racing the ghost of his brother is a way more effective introduction to the drama of that dynamic, and that it's too much right beforehand, and like him sitting on his lap, like don't steer, drive, or whatever the line was. Like, I think that's so good, but that could have been later in the movie, and like that could have been the scene when he's doing the race later on, you know, like or like doing the race where his brother died. Like, that would have been a really good moment there.
Although I'm not a driver, but it is not a good idea to close your eyes when you drive. Like, I am
totally
pretty
not.
sure that's true.
He did win the race, though.
Well, you know, how am I going to argue a Speed Racer? You're right. I don't drive. He does. So, Fair enough.
I think you could pepper it in throughout the movie instead of like just giving this like giant chunk of wasabi right at the front.
Just ramming it down your throat.
Yeah.
And then using the whole middle for your manifesto. And then finally giving us some wonderful slapstick racing towards the third act.
Yeah, because how much stronger would it be if in his darkest moments after realizing that the whole sport is rigged, if you actually see why he loves it so much with his brother instead of opening the movie with it twice?
Yeah, I do feel like it's a lot of redundancy between like the first race scene and that opening flashback. Because the things we had to get from the opening flashback, right? It's like Speed likes racing, Trixie likes Speed, Speed loves his brother. We get Speed loves his brother in the immediate scene afterwards, very effectively, and I think a much more dramatic time. Very easy to toss in a little Trixie and Speed youthful flashback literally anywhere else in the movie. They have so many scenes together that you could just do a little wipe, throw it in there, wipe right back to them repeating a line maybe or something similar to call back to it. Speed loves racing, also very effectively established in that first scene, first race. I think you're onto something here with like that is not the way to open this movie, because I think that leans a lot on the nostalgia that isn't the target audience, especially if you're pitching like move it to G. G audiences are not going to have nostalgia for a cartoon that came out in the 60s in the way that this movie expects them to with the scene that it's selected to go first.
Yeah. I will miss the cartoon moment of mini Speed like driving and like that kind of thing, the artwork behind him. I will miss that, but I don't think that's necessarily.
I don't even think you have to lose it. I just think you put it in at a different spot. Because the other thing is that I was about to call him Squirtle.
Squirtle's his new name. I love it. So, call him Squirtle.
Like going from young Speed so quickly to then having Spritle, like there was a half moment of like, wait, what happened there with the actors?
Yeah,
because it's such a like, oh, our family just does the same thing again and again and again because we are stuck in this cycle of mom and pop have a kid who becomes a great racer, and then they have a little brother who looks up to them, and then that first brother dies, other kid grows up, new brother like
Speed actually turns to him and goes, "You'll understand when it's your turn." Like that's what he says when he's about to leave. Like it's not even like I'm gonna die and you're gonna do this too. It's kind of the feeling of that line.
Yeah, so I just feel like that would help keep also clarity on like, oh no, this is the child that's in the movie that we're going to care about throughout the whole thing, as opposed to the young version of Speed Racer.
Yeah.
And I realize that like, if you're really into the whole franchise, you probably didn't even think about it because like sometimes you just know a thing too well. You know, you like perhaps the mysterious identity of Racer X,
who unbeknownst to Speed is his older brother Rex.
Yes, exactly. But because like I also don't want to lose the way that Spritle is introduced, because it's like fun watching the parents watching the race, and then it cuts down to them, and it's like I can't watch, you watch, and he hands off the binoculars to Chim Chim, and I lost my shit at that moment.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, there are definitely scenes that work with them.
Yeah, so I like all that, and I love our cast, and I like seeing like Susan Sarandon as like mom racer, both for when it's a little bit younger and then also a little bit later on. Like those are good moments there. And John Goodman is great as Pops, and like having that family dynamic. I want to see some of that younger stuff, but I just don't need to see it all so much right up front.
Yeah.
And I think you could have intercut it throughout to, you know, tell the story of why Speed cares so much about the purity of the sport.
Yeah. I think that would be a solid edit to the film.
So, yeah, regardless of if it's considered a PG-13 or a G movie or just stays a PG movie, because like PG could have been fine. Like a lot of people are able to go see a PG movie. A lot of parents take their kids to see a PG movie. Like that all would have been fine. It's just it's so expensive and it's so long. And if it's a little bit shorter, even if it still costs as much, they can put more screenings in. And if you get more butts in the seat, then it's good.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes movies are cut down too much because they want to get more theater screenings, and then that hurts it, like Superman 4. But this is one where, like, God damn it, the Wachowskis just like
the Wachowskis love their long movies.
all of their movies are.
Yeah. They've got a lot to say, and they have a very hard time editing themselves. And this is something that's consistent with them. I always think that what I love about them is they always are challenging themselves and their audience, and they're always trying for something different with every project that they do. And so it's always interesting to watch, even when it's not good. You know, like Jupiter Ascending is not good. It's not. But it was fun to watch, and there were elements that were amazing, and there were elements that I was like, why, what are you doing? But it had a lot of things introduced and a lot of things that they wanted to put out there, but it was too much. And with this movie, again, this is actually more coherent than Jupiter Ascending by a mile. But the problem is again, they have a hard time kind of editing themselves and deciding. They love so much of what they're doing that they try to keep all of it. They try to protect all of it, and it's to the detriment of the film because it doesn't flow as quickly, or it's too long and it gets redundant. Yeah.
And we see that time and time again. Like the Matrix Revolutions is that because they have so many babies that they love. Because like my hot take has always been that Reloaded is a great movie that required a good follow up for people to look fondly on it, and that people just weren't sure what to make of it when it came out. And then the next one was bad. And so that as a result, they both became bad. But like they had Reloaded, they had the video game Enter the Matrix, they had the Animatrix, they had so much stuff going into it all. And they're like, how do we tie all this up in the third movie in our trilogy? And they couldn't stick the landing because they couldn't figure out which one thing to focus on. And so there's so fucking much stuff going on. And like every project I look at after that has the same issue where they just have too many babies that they enjoy in this thing, and they need to put them in the piranha tank.
They just get those piranhas to live it out, or dip it in some quicksand, and then pull out, and whatever stays on the stick gets to stay in the movie. And that's the thing. Again, I actually really enjoy them as filmmakers. It is always kind of like a crapshoot. Like is this going to be coherent? Like, is this going to be good?
They're really all or nothing as filmmakers. Like, it's either the best thing you've ever seen, or like I can't stand to watch it.
But it's always going to be, something. There's always going to be. They're always going to have some sort of point of view, and whether or not they are able to capitalize or even give you any resolution on those points of view, that is up in question. But they're always going to say something.
Yeah.
And I will give them that. They always have a point of view.
I almost think with Speed Racer, its strength is that it was directed by the Wachowskis because of its look, its aesthetic, and how much it elevates the medium it's in. But its weakness is that it's directed by the Wachowskis because it is trying very hard to say something for a PG, potentially PG-13 movie, where the focus really should be in this movie on, wow, these are some crazy stunts these cars are doing. Speed has a very standard arc that I don't think you really need to change too much. Crisis of faith about the thing you love, doubling down through the strength of your friends and your family, ultimate victory. That's not too wild and out there. You don't need a lot of legwork to make that understood. Royalton has a lot going on about capitalism. That's a very Wachowski move.
I mean, I will say to their credit, it's one that fits better here than a lot of themes that they tend to opine about. Like,
agree.
It works. It's just, it's too raw. Again, like this movie needs another editing pass, and that could go all the way back to the screenplay. Like it just feels like very early drafts for at least like the big ideas they want to deal with. And then they figured out how they want to shoot everything. And then we're like, oh, look at all this great stuff.
Yeah.
2 hours and 10 minutes. Here you go.
Yeah.
I imagine it's a movie that was difficult to edit as well because of the style that they chose, which I think is great. I think it makes it stand out from a lot of other blockbusters that came out of a similar era. But it is, as an editor looking at it, I'm like, that would be a nightmare to get any notes on. There are so many moving pieces and so many components going on screen at any given time that like to cut a scene out requires a lot of finagling. It's not impossible, and they should have done it, but it is the kind of thing where I could see someone getting like a few weeks into the edit and being like, I don't know if I really want to trim this up too much, so hopefully they just don't have any notes and I won't give any editing notes on it.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, they spent a lot of money on those visuals and a lot of money on those editing scenes and whatnot, and like, or on those editors, and then all of a sudden it was like, wow, we spent a lot of money on stuff that we ultimately really should cut.
Yeah.
Which is a problem.
The phrase in the industry is kill your babies, kill your darlings. It's good advice. Sometimes it doesn't matter how much money you spend on something. If you want to make a return, you really do got to trim it up.
Yeah. Now I'm wondering, and like now I'm like very directly wondering this, but like I haven't seen anything reference it, but when this movie came out, this is right around the time we're seeing a lot of movies that had some big issues because of the Writers Guild strike in 2007. And I'm wondering how much could have actually been changed. But it's written by the Wachowskis, and the directors are always allowed to make rewrites as they go. Maybe so. I don't know if this is even a possibility because it was written and directed by, and that changes some of the rules there. But I do wonder if maybe they got the script to a place that they liked it, and then they couldn't really update it, or at least like officially.
Yeah, that
before
might be
they
a
started
possibility.
Yeah, it's entirely
before at least
possible.
they started like working on some of the visual.
Yeah.
Like that's the problem that happened with like the second Bay Transformers, where like there were all these shots that they had to send to the editors for it to come out. But by the time they were able to like make rewrites, they're like, well, we've already spent like several $1 million on this shot with like the testicles on the giant robot. And like, are we going to cut it? Well, yeah, we could, but we just spent a ton of money on it. So it's chasing like bad money with good at a lot of spots. And I'm wondering if that happened here because, again, the timing maps out, but it is written and directed by the Wachowskis, and the Writers Guild allows directors to do rewrites of their own stuff. So
Yeah.
Well, there were 2 other writers, though, also on this. Because IMDb says it was Lily and 2 others. Like, that's, like, the official. So I don't know. Maybe there was something there where, like, if someone else touches the script, you know? I don't know. I don't know how the Writers Guild works.
Well, and also there were lots of versions before this one ultimately was made, so it might be a scenario where there are legacy credits as well.
Right. So I don't know. I don't know if that affects whether or not they could have edited it. Like, I'm not sure where.
Yeah. At least one of
Where
those
the
writing credits
gray
is
lines are.
the creator of the original anime, which
Okay, all right.
that's not going to affect it too much about whether or not you can do rewrites. I'm not sure about the other.
The first one, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And like Wikipedia lists just the Wachowskis as the writers. So like, and not to say that that's more authentic
Than IMDb.
or more credible. But it's just, it is interesting to know like where, like if you're just saying written by, it's the Wachowskis, and if you're doing like all the screenplay credits, you get more names.
Right.
So like I said, it could be that there's like residual scenes that they just, you know, like the Writers Guild in terms of like deciding who has ownership of a thing. Oftentimes when you're adapting properties, there's issues because they're adapting scenes that were already existing in previous material. So all those characters in an earlier person's draft are still going to be in this movie because it's still being based on Speed Racer.
Right.
So it might get kind of difficult there.
Yeah.
And again, I have seen nothing that said that was part of the issue in the production of this movie. It's just interesting to realize that like, oh, wait, that's exactly the time where it would have been an issue for the production of this movie. Yeah. And our big issue is that like, oh, well, they didn't do an editing pass to get it trimmed down enough so that all of a sudden they had this giant bloated movie. Yeah. And I'm not trying to be mean about it, but like this big bloated movie that they couldn't edit down because they'd already spent all the money on the special effects, which happened to all the other movies that were made at that same time.
Yeah, that's true. Although we do have a pattern of them not editing down their work. So
right. Exactly. So,
I was like, these are kind of repeat offenders when it comes to that specific thing.
It's sort of a case where like there are definitely extenuating circumstances from the time it was released, but also we do have a lot of works in these particular director/writer combo category to indicate that maybe there was a little bit of their own style bleeding into it.
Right.
Yeah.
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 I love where your brain is going.
Yeah.
Because honestly, this is actually, I think, you know, I think if you haven't seen it and you're listening to this, I think you should check it out because I think it's pretty cool. I think it does some really experimental stuff. And I think that overall the performances are really good. It's just kind of long. So like you just have to carve out time in your life for it. But like, yeah, it is too long. The biggest failing of this film is that it's too long. It needs to be cut down, and that's the only way you could fix it. Because it's actually a fine movie. It's fine.
Yeah, and I wouldn't cut down, I wouldn't fully cut out any scene or anything like that. It's just everything just needs to be trimmed and maybe consolidated.
Everything just needs to be tighter. Everything needs to be tighter. And someone needs to sit there with them and go, this is redundant. We don't need this here. Like you said this 5 minutes ago. Or like you say this better 3 scenes from now. So like this little thing, like we can snip out, you know, because that's that's what's happening. And I don't think that I don't think making those changes would make the audience understand less what's happening. I just think it would keep them more engaged because they're not rehearing things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, it's definitely a fun movie. I fully agree. I think people should, if they haven't watched it and have listened to our entire 2-hour-ish episode.
Speaking of rants that need to be cut down, that might have been redundant. We're sorry.
But fortunately, we have an editor who we love. Matt, I love you. I'm just going to say that in the episode. This is not it. Like,
we love Matt a lot.
Yeah.
Me more than Case.
Because
officially
an editor,
in the episode.
Yes. Because an editor is important. And this movie could have really used a stronger editor.
Like Matt.
But also, you know, there are lots of great editors in this world, like Sophia.
Oh,
so,
thanks.
Sophia, thank you for bringing this movie for us to talk about. It's always one that's been like on my list of like, I should watch that at some time. And like, it's great to have like reasons to do so. So I'm very glad that we watched it. I'm very glad we had a chance to talk about it and also kind of just enjoy it. Like, like I think we're all in agreement. Like, it's a fun movie. Going into it, you should be prepared however you need to prepare.
Yeah, prepare with snacks.
Yeah.
Make sure you use the bathroom already. Have a pause
go
button.
into it prepared however you need to prepare, be it snacks, be it like ready to take breaks in throughout
soothing
it all,
music.
be it some substances that make, you know, all the pretty colors work a little bit better because you know, sometimes that makes some of this better.
Yeah,
but,
if you crochet, do your project while you're watching this. Give your hands something to do.
But it's definitely a fun movie, and I'm really glad that we had a chance to talk about it. So, Sophia, thank you for coming on, and thank you for bringing this. And where can people find you and follow you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to pop up and talk about Speed Racer. It is one of my favorite movies, as much as there are things that could be fixed about it. Honestly, like we've said a million times, it's just a fun watch. And if you know what you're in for, you're going to have a good time watching it. You can find my podcast Movie Struck on all fine podcasting platforms by just searching Movie Struck, all one word. I am on Twitter at Sophie_K_, and that's K spelled Kay. And that's pretty much it. I have a few other shows, Rolling with Difficulty and the Overly Sarcastic podcast, which can also be found on all fine podcasting platforms, and also those two on YouTube, just by searching their names. But maybe Twitter still exists by now, so that's kind of my main thing. And if it doesn't, I have a portfolio website that is sophiakricci.com. If you need editing work, whether you are a Wachowski or not, I'm available for hire. And also, I just love talking about movies. This has been an absolute delight. What a way to spend 2 hours. And thank you guys so much for having me on. This has been a blast. We've only talked about good movies so far between the Muppets and this. We're really knocking it out of the park.
Right. Well, the goal isn't to be like bad movies. Like this movie was a bomb. It's perfect for us to discuss like how could it have sold better.
Right.
So lot of fun. And so again, thank you for coming on. Also, you mentioned them, but thank you to Overly Sarcastic Productions for like introducing us, Red specifically, but like, they're great.
They're awesome.
Like,
and I don't just say that because they employ me. They are actually very fun.
Yeah, like I, giving them a shout out feels like I'm pretty sure that like the Venn diagram of like who would actually listen to our show is probably like a tiny little circle in their much bigger circle that is their audience. But but still, like they do great stuff, and we were really glad that we had Red on the show and that Red introduced us because you're awesome to chat with.
Aww.
So all great people, and that's kind of what I love about podcasting because you get to meet and chat with so many cool people and have great conversations like the ones that I get to have with you, Sam. Sam, where can people find you and follow you?
Well, I'm too busy for them to find me anywhere here, but here, or occasionally when I remember our Discord exists. Other than that, I am currently trying to stop Tim Tim from delivering a lot of Tim Tim cookies to people, and that is a full-time job. So if you have any complaints about anything that I said, including renaming a character Squirtle or talking about sepia-toned filmed movies, you can find Case at...
Well, as long as it's still around, you can find me on Twitter at Case Aiken. And I'm sure that our audience is getting tired of hearing about it because at this point, they're probably aware of where the party is at. But at this time in December, we don't know.
None of us know.
We don't know.
It's the wild freaking West, guys.
Yeah, every day there's something new.
Yeah.
Not that I would know because I'm busy with my friend Chimp.
Right. No, you have to dodge that monkey wrench. Like that is a very difficult
Critical.
part of your job, and you should be getting more hazard pay than you do.
Well, I'm actually training him how to use it more effectively. So,
Well, but that's
for self-defense.
That's a double-edged wrench right there.
Listen, he's innocent. Leave him alone.
Okay. But if Twitter is gone by this time, I have a Hive set up, which is @CaseAiken. Probably any other social media that people settle on, I'm going to end up using @CaseAiken, except for Instagram, because I was foolish when I set it up. You can find me on Instagram @Quetzalcoatl5, because I'm a mythology nerd and also a Legion of Superheroes nerd. Hi. Yes, me. You know who I am.
They know by now. They know. They know.
On the burning hell site that is Twitter, you can find the show @AnotherPass. But you know what? Like, you should just go to certainpov.com, where you can find more episodes of this show and tons of other great shows, such as recently added to our network, Jukebox Vertigo, which is a really cool show where Keith and Josue talk through each episode. They bring a theme to build a Spotify playlist. So them and their guests all like contribute songs, and then each week after the episode drops, they do a listening party on Twitch, and you can watch Josue like play Mario Kart or some other. Mario Kart's perfect here. Yay. Play Mario Kart where they just like jam out to the tracks. I was on one of the episodes, and it was really fun just to like then join them for the Twitch and like listen to my picks of movie soundtrack songs while doing like crazy Mario Kart stuff, because I brought some disco, because I really like Everybody Wants Some. So
nice.
So that's a really cool show. It's finally set up on our website, because it took me forever just to like get my ass in gear and put that up. But at this point, it's been several months. So you can find it at certainpov.com. And there's lots of other great shows, but eventually we would like you to come back to this thread and listen to the next episode. Sam, what have we got up next?
Well, next time we'll be talking about Highlander 2, The Quickening. But until then, if you enjoyed this, pass it on.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Another Pass is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Sam Alicea and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Matt Storm. Our logo and episode art is by Case Aiken. Our intro theme is by Vin Macri, and our outro theme is by Matt Brogan.
I probably should have done this before we started recording. So I realized that I had, because I listened to all my podcasts at like at 1.7 speed, that like listening to your show all the time, like when you say your name, it just is like, and I like switched it to like regular mode, which is super uncomfortable for me. I've realized now. I'm so used to like super fast. So Ricciardi. Ricciardi.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's
like,
no one has
like
ever gotten it right. It's
Ricciardi.
It's Ricciardi.
I went to go re-listen, and I was like, so I say it right, and I was like, I don't know what those sounds I just heard were because it was too fast.
I just sort of like speed through it on the podcast too, so it's like,
right.
No one's getting it. But there's a with names that are escaping me. I have IMDb pulled up because I'm awful with actors' names. I like got faces down and then immediately Christina Ricci is in this movie, and I was like,
yes,
last name synergy, it's happening.
Okay,
yeah, very similar.
Yeah, just add more to it at the end. You got it.
Now I'm wondering, like, is that a shortened version of her name?
Maybe. Apparently, according to my older Italian relatives, Ricciardi is a very common name in Italy, but I've never been, and I've never met any other Ricciardis, so who knows? Maybe.
No, if it might be shortened, but it's not. It was not shortened by her as like a stage name. I was curious about.
Huh.
Cool, and it just needs to be good enough that like Matt, when he's editing, like sliding everything around, it's like, oh, here.
Yep. Got a slate.
That's amazing. So I'm sure he's got it.
Yeah.
We love you, Matt. Well, I love you. I don't know how Case feels. I'm not going to speak for him.
They spoke at my wedding.
Yeah, so they spoke at your wedding. That means they love you. That doesn't mean
I asked them to.
So you asked them for labor, okay? Does that really indicate love? I'm just saying. When I love people, I like them to enjoy a party and not have to think about the trauma of having to speak out loud. starting this off right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.